everyone. Welcome back to the second class for the Reliquary bags. We're having technical difficulties, so this class is only going to be me talking and showing you my treasures because there's nobody else to show me there. That's not true. Yeah, Greth can show me her projects because I'm really excited to see what you've been working on and what you've done. If you remember at the last class, one of the ones I talked about was a cross stitch applique. So I did a cross stitch pattern, and this is a device for my particular kingdom. And I play in a historical recreation group called the Society for Creative Anachronism. And it's not my favorite finishing. I'm going to do the edges differently on the next one, but you see I embellished it with pearl buttons in the corner. I used rat tail cotton as my drawstring, and then I have these gorgeous little beads that are also in the design of my kingdom. Remember, the most important thing for these reliquary bags is the bling. The more bling, the better. The fancier, the better. Because these were things that people used to hold things that were very treasured and special to them. And the fancier, the better they are. Now, if you want, here's my cross stitch in process. And I'm doing another one because I'm going to do 3 bags with that Kaid cross. This particular bag, I put on Dupioni silk and I lined with blue Dupioni, and I made a pull drawstring at the top. At this point, I would ask you to see what you've done, but there's nobody out there to show me what they've done. I'm so sad. That's not true. Stacy, do you want to show your bag?
Sure. Here, let me remove your pin. So here's me. Hi, I'm Greth from the West. This is the one I'm currently working on. It is wool on, well, it's felt on wool. And then I did a little decorative embroidery stitch and then used chain stitch to do the edging. And then I'm using a blanket stitch. I'm on the point where I'm lining it in the same color because that's what I've got. And then my little foldy guy, I've got this big button, this big shiny button to go on there. So that's the one I'm working on.
Hi, I'm back. So this one is the felt applique reliquary bag, similar to the one that Greth is working on. The bag part, the gray part, is an acrylic wool combination, mostly because the real wool is like $25 a yard. So unless that's really what you're committed to, it's probably a bit more than most of us are willing to spend.
My bag was the body of my bag is made out of a scrap wool blanket that I cut up to make a cloak. So I just saved the scraps. So that's a cheap way to get, you know, poke your seamstresses for scraps.
That's perfect. You can see that I also used a blanket stitch to put the embellishment on. So the different patterns that I put on that bag, I used a blanket stitch to put them on. And you're going to want to applique that part onto the bag before you finish the bag. And you saw that with Greth's bag as well. And then I just chose to embellish it with beads at the corners. This one is lined with just a gray linen. It's very simple, very easy. Once again, I chose this gray linen because I had it. And these are easy to make out of scraps that you have hanging around. And then this one I chose to close with this pretty clasp that I found on probably Amazon, could have been Etsy, could have been eBay. I will tell you, with all the brooches that I purchased, I did not pay more than $5 for any of them. That may be out of somebody's price range, but that made them very reasonable for me. So the piece I'm working on now that I'm appliquing is this guy. Those of you in the West may recognize this little guy. in green and blue. This is the real wool, just so you know, Misties, this is the real wool. But I found it in a remnant bin, so that's why I got it. And once again, I'm doing a blanket stitch. What I'd like to do is a couple of stitches, and then I'm going to switch to my other camera so you can see my up close work. So there's my blanket stitch in. And there you can see my stitches a little bit better. My blanket stitches are going in down here. The thread that I'm using isn't really necessarily thread. It's silk. It's thicker than what most people would think of as thread. I got it from an online source. Comes in a myriad of colors. But you could also use DMC embroidery floss. You wouldn't have to, you know, spend money and get silk thread. You could use DMC embroidery floss just as well. The colors that you pick would be the colors that make you happy. For this particular bag, the group's colors are blue and green and white. And this is the symbol. Well, this is my interpretation of one of the symbols of that particular group. Yeah. The next one I want to talk about is the beaded bag. So here's one that's very, very beaded. And I think you can see up close the different colors of the beads. So I have one that I'm working on that I'm going to reach over and get. The thing with the beaded ones are you have to think about the needle you're going to use for your beading. And so these were fairly good sized beads. So a regular sewing needle would pass through them. But for the smaller ones, like the little tiny seed beads that I used on this piece, you have to use a beading needle. Now, beading needles can be a challenge. Getting thread to go through that eye. First off, thread that's thin enough to go through that eye of that needle. And then having eyes that can make the thread go through the eye of that needle can be a bit of a challenge as well. So that would be something else to think about as you're beading that. Once again, there's really no rhyme or reason to it. You could do whatever makes you happy. And you know what the cool thing is about it? If you look at it and you're not happy anymore, you can take it away. You can cut your threads and you can take that beading off and start over again. I chose to close this one with an eagle woven strap, and I used aglets. Can you see the aglets? Hang on a second. Let me go to the other camera. There we go. Against the back of my shirt, that's a little bit easier to see. So the aglet is a little metal tip that goes over the end of that string that I chose. And this one I chose to stitch onto the string with a thin silver thread. There we are, we're back. I've totally lost my train of thought. I remember what else I was going to talk. I was going to talk about the cross stitch part. Now, the cross stitch pattern I chose was a specific pattern for a specific group, but it doesn't mean you can't pick anything that makes you happy, including, I found this in the markdown bin at the local fabric store. I could do a rainbow cupcake. Whatever makes you happy. Because remember, this bag is for you. It's to carry things that are important to you or precious to you. Yes, they're reliquary bags because they are based upon the historical references of a reliquary bag, which was a bag that was used to carry something that was precious, but that could be anything from a religious relic to your chapstick, whatever makes you happy. I would ask for questions, but there's no one to ask questions. Anybody have a question?
So I'm going to make the assumption that before you do the applique of the cross stitch piece, that you will fold the edges under.
I did fold the edges under on the first one, but I wasn't happy with how that finished. I don't know if you can see the edges. I'm just not pleased with that. Even though it's a finished edge, it looks raw, to my opinion.
How about just doing a stem stitch along the edge then as a border in the same blue?
The next one I think I'm going to do, I'm going to try one doing a stem stitch, and the other I'm going to try actually sewing the dupione to my Aida cloth. Now, in the historical time frame, they would not have used Aida cloth. They would have used linen, but I'm fairly new to cross stitch, so I haven't branched out into linen yet. That will be my next foray, but I really didn't think that was something I should try and then pretend that I knew how to do when I taught a class. Any other questions?
Have you done any other styles of stitching, such as the freestyle stitching? You can see for Celtic knotwork, for example.
The Celtic knotwork I have not tried yet. I've done like the embroidery stitches that you learn as that I learned as a young child, a schoolgirl. You know, the little chain stitches to make your pretty daisy and the little French knots and things like that. It fascinates me, but mostly what I've done for these bags is the blanket stitch and then just your basic chain stitch for accentuation. For example, on my Seawolf, I'm probably going to do a chain stitch so that he has a mouth, and I may do some stitches so that it looks like he has claws. Pardon me.
And have you experimented with linen threads for your embroidery yet?
No, but I'm really glad you asked that. I've always been the kind of person, when someone says you can't do that, I tend to say, oh, really? Watch. So somebody told me that cross stitch did not fit into the SCA period. And you're right, this does not. However, that type of over-under stitching does. And so I found several really, really wonderful examples from historical periods. For example, Mary Queen of Scots, which was an excellent excuse to buy a new book. So I can play in that. So to answer your question, yes, my next foray is to play with linen and linen thread. Hi, Lily.
Hi, I had a horrible time trying to get in here.
So did everybody else. This class is going to be really short, and then I'm going to do another one. We are recording, just so you know.
Okay,
oh, honey, that's beautiful.
Well, I couldn't figure out how to do a lining.
Okay.
And I don't think I'm happy.
Lily, do you mind if I pin you to the recording so we can see your bag on the recording?
Sure. Let me take out my needle. I wasn't sure if I was doing it right.
Honey, it's beautiful. So to line the bag, you basically make a second bag out of whatever you want the lining to be.
Right, I did
and
that.
then for that felt part, where'd I put him?
Maybe the material was very thick. It was this thick cotton, and it just, you know, I didn't know how to turn under the sides for the flap going down.
Right. So right here,
yeah.
Can you see my edge?
Yes.
That's my lining. So I just turned my edge under, and then I used my blanket stitch to stitch the two together.
But you have a very thin lining, right?
It's linen, yeah,
Okay, see, this cotton was way too thick.
that
So
could be, yeah.
I decided, forget the lining, but I don't know. I wasn't sure how to finish it or
You
do
did a great job. That's beautiful. I love the tassel
the
If
and the
I may,
butterfly.
if I may, the next time you're in the store, check out the remnants bin to see if there's any broadcloth, because that should be thin enough that you can make your lining out of that.
A
Okay.
broadcloth would be beautiful, yes.
Just remember to pre-wash it.
Right. And what about making a handle? Did you, I'm sorry, did you discuss that if I wanted to like wear this over my shoulder?
I did not, but if you wanted to wear it, there's several ways to think about it. If you want to wear it over your shoulder, I would probably use a piece of inkle weaving,
I
or
don't
you
do
could even
anything.
you could even find something in the fabric store that they would have used for a belting.
Can I interject and show off another pouch that I'm working on that
Oh,
shows
please do.
Perfect. So, make me think. So this is one that I've been working on for a while. This is German brick stitch. So all that pattern is stitched into the fabric. It kind of falls into the cross stitch
Uh-huh.
bags that Sam has been talking about. But I made see the handle?
Yes.
So it hangs. Basically, I did this is a Kumohimo braid. You can also do finger loop weaving or finger loop braiding or ankle weaving. All three are in multiple periods. And what I did was I started here at the bottom corner and wrapped it all the way around and then came back down this other side. And that makes this little loop so that it can hang from a belt. And then it'll eventually, I haven't gotten there yet, but it'll have a drawstring. So it'll look like little tassels coming out the sides. So that's one way to do it. The other thing that you can do is a little loop so that on the back, so that you can run a belt through it. So that it hangs from your belt, or you can just make this cord long enough that it can go over your shoulder.
Okay. Right.
Another way of doing a handle is if you've got a purchased trim, like the stuff that Calendar Trim sells, you can use that. But before you sew it on, take the time to find some twill tape, preferably cotton, that's the same width, and sew that on for strength. And that'll also protect the back of the trim from rubbing on your garments. And then you can sew that on in the same way.
Okay, good idea. Thank you.
If you choose to use the trim like suggested, which is a brilliant idea, bling up the trim. Sew pearls on it, sew beads on it.
Get all Byzantine on it.
Yes, because that's the whole point of these bags in the time period was they were blingy, blingy, blingy. This was your way to show your wealth, your way to just be out there.
Okay.
Ainsley, thank you. That was brilliant. Greth, thank you. That was brilliant also.
Is finger weaving like a crochet that you do with your finger, or is it something else?
I
There's
would say
multiple
so.
styles.
I've only done it once or twice because it makes me sit still too long.
There is a Kumihimo class I remember being offered. I just don't know if it's already happened yet or not.
No, it hasn't. I did sign up for it, but
Oh, you might enjoy
But
that
there's-
then.
Yeah, there's you can do it as Kumihimo finger looping. There's the 4-strand Viking style finger looping, which I think there was a class on, or there's going to be a class on. You could, if you use a lucet, you could make a lucet cord to go around it, which would be highly appropriate for a late period style pouch.
that's this afternoon's class, the lucet.
Oh, yes. And that's easy because that's really portable and you can pick it up and put it down and you don't have to remember where you were. It's very easy to start and stop.
You can probably make a lucet from 3 or 4 layers of cardboard just glued together, cut them out and then glue them together until you can, events happen again and you can get a wooden one or order one online.
And I've seen Kumihimo I don't know what to call them. They look like a collar made out of basically like a dense cell foam.
Yeah,
My,
it's called a disc.
my Kumohimo disc is just made out of cardboard. I just made a like beginner one out of cardboard with a hole in the middle and a couple of little cutouts for however many strand I was working on. But finger loop braiding confuses my brain, so Kumohimo becomes a little easier. But finger loop braiding is basically you're braiding a bunch of loops together. So instead of like a traditional braid where you're braiding with like a loose end, you're basically braiding with loops at your fingertip end instead of at the beginning.
So it sounds more difficult.
I know that the Michaels in Canada here sells a little Kumihimo kit. In Canadian funds, it's like $1.49, so it's going to be about $1 in the US. It's meant for birthday party grab bags. So it's pre-strung. You get a wooden a cardboard Kumihimo disc and the instructions, and then you can just keep reusing the disc until it falls apart.
That's pretty cool. I wonder if they would have that online then.
I don't know how Michael's online works in the States. I know it doesn't really work here in Canada,
Okay.
but you might find it on Amazon too.
Oh, that's probably, it's amazing the things you could find on Amazon when you're looking, even when you're not looking.
So you said, could you hold up the ones that you finished? You said, I'm sorry, I was late, but
Oh, no problem, honey.
couldn't.
So-
I tried everything. I couldn't get it.
So this is the felt applique one.
Right.
And my bag itself is a acrylic wool blend. And so are the pieces in here, but you wouldn't have to go with that if that was not within your budget. And then I attached the applique pieces using a blanket stitch.
Mhm.
And to be real honest, this particular pattern, I liked the pattern on some tiles at a home improvement store. And I took its picture with my phone and I just printed it and cut them out. And that's how I made the pattern.
There's lots of examples of English floor tiles online and in some of the Dover art books. That's a great idea for patterns.
Oh, yeah.
Another one that I've recently just cut out. I liked the design on a basically a flower pot in my boss's office. And I very quietly took its picture with my phone during a meeting and turned that into a really pretty peacock looking pattern that I'm going to put on. The other one that I finished was the cross stitch. Now this is canna cross stitch, and as such, canna cross stitch is a very modern thing. And this is on modern Aida cloth because this is kind of like my first foray into cross stitch. I'm not a real expert at it. But you can see it fits quite nicely on the bag. The bag itself is made out of silk dupioni, which is one of my more favorites. And I got a string, just a minute. And it's a drawstring bag. I lined it with blue dupioni, with blue silk. And the way you make that is you just make 2 bags. And then when you go to sew it together, the bag on the outside, I don't know if you can see it here. I basically left like a buttonhole.
Yes.
So that I could use my giant safety pin and thread my drawstring through. Now for this bag, I chose to use just rat tail that I bought at the fabric store. And I finished the end of it with silver buttons. You could also, however, finish the end with the aglets. And aglets are, hang on a second, I'll switch to the other camera because it's a better background. So against the dark of my t-shirt, you can see the aglet. It's a silver piece that I sew onto the end of that string, that thread.
So it's like a cone shaped.
It is a cone shape.
Yeah. Okay.
And they're very easy to find on online resources as well. So this is the brocaded bag that I beaded. And once again, the beading is just fun. Here's one with a pomegranate.
Pretty.
And this fabric was a piece of brocade in the remnants bin at the fabric store.
Hmm.
Now you can look online and find amazing stuff. I found in my online search a company that makes liturgical fabric for the church. Wow, it is gorgeous. It's also like some of them are like $300 a meter.
Ooh.
Yeah, so this was not $300 a meter. This was like, you know, $5 or less in the remnant bin at the fabric store.
Tip for some places like that make specialty fabrics, they usually have like tiny cut pieces or like the beginning pieces. So if you contact them and you're like, hey, I'm looking for scrap of this fabric, do you have any? They'll usually send them to you for free with just the cost of the mail.
Oh, that's a good idea. I had no idea. Well, I'll have to check that out because believe me, I found some beautiful pieces. Yeah.
Yeah, a bunch of fabric. I know a bunch of fabric makers down in LA, and they just have bins of stuff that they end up putting through recycle. And so when they get a bunch of people asking, you know, for upholstery samples and things like that, or just samples, and they'll just have scrap pieces, and they'll usually send them to you for a very minimal cost or just the postage.
You know, now that you mentioned that, I do have a nice chunk of a natural colored raw silk that I got from when an upholstery store here in town went out of business. And it was just in their rubbish pile.
You can also find, I'm in the San Francisco Bay Area, and we have a few locations. One of them, my favorite, is called Scrap, and they're just like a scrap artist supply place, and they get a bunch of upholstery fabric, like sample sheets. Places like Joann's also has those sections of the, you know, made to order fabrics. And when they discontinue them, they have those pieces usually just kind of hanging out in the store. You can ask, and they give those away for free too at Joann's.
I live in Las Vegas, and while we have a lot of costumes, they're not usually very appropriate for the historical period we play in.
And I bet they don't have much left over. They're so tiny.
Oh, so one of the members of our group is head of security for the Nevada State Museum. And they, about 2 years ago, got a donation from the Folies Bergère of all of their costumes.
Whoa.
And I got to wear one of the headdresses. Those things weigh a ton. Yeah. Oh, it was so much fun to put on all those. Well, some of them, a lot of them didn't fit me because I'm not that teeny.
But being in Las Vegas, it might be almost Mecca for beads, spangles, and bindings.
There's actually a wonderful store who's, now that I want to say the name, can't think of the name, that has the most odd fabric and headies, HEDDYS. For example, I bought linen that had been treated with silver paint. So it was linen and it was flexible, but it was silver paint. And they had used it somewhere on for one of the shows. And this was just, you know, what they had left over. It's amazing the things you can find from the shows, and the feathers. Oh my gosh. Yeah.
The Landsneck folk would love it.
Yes, because some of those feathers are just so ostentatious. They are really fun.
So it occurs to me that these bags that you're talking about and you're explaining, a really good use for them would be if you were to put award devices on them and then gift them to royalty as largesse for award winners, recipients. That
would work too. It occurred to me, one of the traditions in our particular group is you give gifts, we call them favors, to the people that serve on your court. And these would make wonderful little court favors, especially if you did it in such a way that this showed on the outside, but they had a way to put it on the belt or to loop it over the belt. If you look at some of the pictures that I have in my documentation, they are worn on the belt, and they're pretty fancy because they don't have to be real big. The other cool thing that I like about giving somebody a favor, if they're working for you, is to make it big enough to do things like hold your chapstick, hold your cell phone, I have an inhaler, hold my inhaler, hold a small bottle of water, those kind of things. And
The bag I have is 2 loops of tablet weaving on each corner. And so it hangs suspended from my belt.
I can see that. I can see that in my mind. In fact, one of my other classes was ankle weaving. My tablet weaving is not there yet. Kind of like my spinning, it's not there yet. All right, my friends. I'm sorry this was such an abbreviated class. I will schedule it to do the class live again. It will be on an odd date, not odd as in a weird day, but odd as in even an odd. Does anybody else have anything they would like to add, like to say? I'm pretty sure this recording will still go up, but
Just to say thank you for going ahead with tonight.
oh, you're
With
so
today.
welcome. I'm really pleased that we got to meet online like this.
Yeah,
I'm
I
honored that you would
enjoyed it.
take my class.
I enjoyed it very much. Thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome.